Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Darshan Talks. I'm here with Josh, and Josh is actually the marketing entrepreneur extraordinaire. Josh actually works a lot with pharmacists. If you guys are looking for someone to help with your marketing efforts, you're in the pharmacy world, Josh is looking to help. So I'm really excited to have Josh on. Josh, tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into what we're doing right now.
Sure, Darshan. Thank you very much for the introduction. I've practically been in marketing my entire life, from the insurance side, and then the last decade or so in pharmaceutical marketing. I currently have an agency called Dispense Marketing where we help independent pharmacies with their marketing efforts. I also do some advocacy work against, the pharmacy benefit managers, big insurance as well. So that's pretty much it in a snapshot.
Yeah, but you've been working with pharmacists for a long time, and you've actually got a couple of groups, and one of the reasons we're doing this is so that we have content for your audience as well. And you're going to today ask me questions. I have no idea what these questions are, but you're going to ask me questions about that you've been asked over time, but that pharmacists are asking, and we're going to try to answer them and see what comes out. So, for those people who don't know, and this was actually for Josh's audience. My name's Darshan Kulkarni. I'm an attorney. I'm a pharmacist. I worked for over 20 years as a pharmacist in various pharmacy settings, everything from hospital, retail, long-term care, teaching, and several others. It's called temping, so it worked out great. And I've also got a ton of experience as a attorney doing FDA regulatory law and compliance. So I work with a lot of pharmacists, so I help with things like buying and selling a pharmacy, thinking about decentralized clinical trials, telepharmacy issues, marketing, dealing with PSAOs and the issues that come along with that, and several others. But Josh and I have talked about this several times, and we've wondered what are issues that pharmacists deal with on a day-to-day basis. We raised some questions. We even got a question actually recently about GLP-1s and how do you position a compounded drug. So we'll talk about compounding pharmacy as well, possibly. I don't know. But hopefully that gives you a little bit about my background. I host this podcast, Darshan Talks. So it's directed to FDA regulated companies. So I talk about quality and compliance and everything else associated with that. I wrote the chapter on pharmacy for compounding pharmacy specifically for this book, and then 3 editions after that. So I've done that as well. I taught at the University of the Sciences, formerly the Philadelphia College of Pharmacy, now part of St. Joe's. So I've done that as well. Yeah, I think I'm sure there's more, but I tend to forget that. I've spoken at PSHP, and I love doing that. I love sort of helping, contributing as much as I possibly can. So that's a little bit about me. So Josh, we had pharmacists asking about asking questions they couldn't ask an attorney without paying a shit ton of money, and that's a technical term. So why don't I'll let you have the floor, and you tell me what people are asking.
Well, one of the biggest things right now is GLP-1 drugs for weight loss. It's a hot
Yeah.
product. And, so I'd like to kind of maybe dive into that a little bit. I wrote some questions too that I wanted to ask. And these are some of the questions I've been getting asked a lot from, our clients and just in, these Facebook groups as well. So I think this will be highly beneficial for anybody that's listening or, into the GLP-1 market. I think, one of the first questions I'd like to ask is, what are some of the biggest regulatory challenges independent pharmacies are facing when, marketing these regulated products like, the GLP, especially for weight loss?
Yeah. So several different things. First of all, we need to clarify that compounded drugs are by definition not FDA approved. Yes, the Ozempic or the Wegovy or the Mounjaro or the Zepbound are all FDA approved, but your product, when it was compounded, was not FDA approved. It did not go through the rigorous testing that the FDA requires. What you're doing is you are meeting a very important need, and the need is, in the case of drug shortages, in the case of unique needs of a specific patient, you are meeting those needs. So right now, as we know, there continues to be a drug shortage. However, there are some questions about whether that shortage has been addressed in at least one commercial manufacturer's case. I think it was Wegovy, I think, is the one that potentially has been addressed. I should probably do a little bit more research in it, but so we know that may be the case, but there's some question as to the commercial manufacturer saying that the shortage is gone, but the FDA not quite conceding that point. So we'll see how that plays itself out. The big regulatory challenges. Number one, if you are a 503B pharmacy, an outsourcing facility, if you will, in that scenario, you're primarily compounding in the case of a shortage. If the shortage is gone, can you continue to compound? That's going to be kind of hard for you to do. You need to keep looking at the FDA shortages list. From a pure manufacturing perspective, the FDA continues to have problems with things like pharmacovigilance. They tend to continue to have problems with things like what's the word I'm looking for? Documentation is another concern that the FDA continues to have problems with. Sterility, stability testing continues to be a problem. On the other hand, from an advertising perspective, here's where it gets really complicated, because people tend to think that that pharmacists can talk about the medication as long as you're talking about the approved drug and apply it to your drug. What's been approved for that drug does not necessarily apply to your drug. So you don't get to generally say, oh, my drug can be used for weight loss because your drug was never approved for that indication. So you have to be very, very careful. So what people will often come out and say is, oh, but we're still engaged in scientific discussion. If you are engaged in scientific discussion, that'd be completely okay. However, you're doing it in the context with the cloak of advertising. And when you do it in the context of advertising, you lose the scientific discussion argument. And that's what you have to be careful of. So if you, for example, were having a theoretical discussion with a physician and saying, look, here's how Wegovy works, here's the GLP-1, here are the receptors it goes to, blah, blah, blah. You weren't trying to sell him anything in a pure scientific discussion, you'd probably be okay. You're doing this on your website, you're trying to sell your product, and you're saying, oh, it works. That's probably not scientific discussion. You're probably subject to the FDA's requirements around safety and efficacy. Some people have gone back and compared themselves to the FDA's, to the Supreme Court decision, which does allow for medication, for scientific discussion in certain specific contexts. And there were some decisions like that, but there's a ton of information that's come through after the fact, suggesting that the FDA doesn't quite review it in the same way. Now, under the Chevron decision, may add some more complexity. But overall, if I was a pharmacy, between being sued by the FDA, by commercial manufacturers, for me, the risk is very, very high. So if you're going to do that, be very careful. I wouldn't make claims about the product. So then the question becomes, what can you do? And what you can do is talk about the disease state. Weight loss is a major concern. Are you looking to have your weight loss addressed? We may have some solutions. That's what some telehealth facilities can talk about. We manufacture semaglutide. If you're a 503B, you can probably talk about that. If we compound semaglutide for individual patients, might be something you can do. But we compound semaglutide for weight loss is a problem. So it's that connecting of the drug to the disease state that's the problem. So I would be careful in that context. There are FTC rules that apply. There are FDA rules that apply. There are influencer rules that apply. So if you bring in an influencer and talk about the drug and how they benefited from it, be very careful. FTC and FDA have rules around that. So those are some of the concerns.
That's an excellent point. I didn't know about influencers. Darshan, I do have like one question. So regarding marketing, there's a lot of compounding pharmacies that are selling the compounded GLP-1 drugs to other pharmacies for weight loss. How does that, with that language on the website, they're doing that by social media? Can that come back to bite them in the butt?
So explain that scenario to me a little bit more. You're saying that it is compounded by one pharmacy, sold to another pharmacy. And then that
Yes.
pharmacy sells it on their website? I'm confused how that process would work.
So they're selling the compounded medications for weight loss, and they're advertising that specifically. And it's for the pharmacies to purchase, and then obviously, they're using it. We know they're using it for weight loss because of all the shortages and stuff. But not necessarily the pharmacy that's purchasing it from the compounding pharmacy is advertising that for weight loss. My more concern is about the larger compounding pharmacies,
Yeah.
making, they're, some of them are doing nationwide. They're specifically selling these compounded GLP-1 drugs, for weight loss.
So two responses to that. The last time I checked, and I know there have been some updates here, so I want to be very clear that I have not looked up the latest law on this one. But the last time I checked, it was illegal for one pharmacy to sell to another pharmacy. It had to be done directly to either the doctor's office if you are, say, a 503B facility, or directly to the patient if you're a 503A. The exception to that was, or you could sell it to like a hospital, which would dispense it to an individual patient. I don't know if you could manufacture it and then sell it to another pharmacy to sell. I'd have to double check that. So if this is a problem you're facing, reach out to me. Let's have a conversation. But short version, be careful. I think there are some rules around this that they specifically talk about.
Gotcha. To kind of like just, I want to go back into the GLP-1s a little bit.
Please.
You mentioned something about the Chevron decision.
Yeah.
How just like I guess like where I'm looking at it is, I see it kind of benefiting or kind of putting a damper on things with the PBMs.
Okay.
How does that affect that whole, I guess, mix? Is it going to be better for independent pharmacies now with that,
Okay.
rolling?
So I'm not. You'd have to be more specific about what the question is. But here's what the Chevron decision basically said. The Chevron decision basically said that when it comes to decisions by a regulatory authority, so whether we're talking about the FDA, we're talking about CMS, whether we're talking about EPA, it doesn't really matter. The courts were beholden under what's called the Chevron decision to basically listen to what to give like a lot of deference to what the agency had come up with and say, look, unless there's a really, really good reason, you listen to what the agency is saying. Don't try to double guess them. Under what's called Loper-Bright, essentially and it came to primarily regulations. When it came to Loper-Bright, they basically said it's a little bit of the fox guarding the hen house. It's if the FDA is making the decision and then the FDA is evaluating the decision, that seems to be problematic. So essentially what they said is, look, we're not going to give that deference in the same way. We as the court will independently evaluate those decisions. There was a recent decision from one of the other courts that said, look, that applies to regulations, that applies to guidances, that does not apply to scientific information. So we're going to continue to give deference to the scientific information, not to the regulatory decisions that were being made. You take all of that under consideration. The big question that would come into play is, what regulation are we saying applies to PBMs? What regulation are they breaking? And then saying, do we want to challenge that regulation? We'd have to do a lot more analysis because we'd have to see what that specific regulation in place was. I don't think, I'm not aware, just to be clear, if there's anything specific that anyone's pointing to so far that I've seen, where it says that we think that a regulatory body overstepped its regulatory power by saying that. If anything, I would argue that most regulatory authorities have been a little bit of a derelict in saying that we want to control what PBMs are doing. So if anything, we want those regulatory authorities to be able to say, we need to have better say in what PBMs are doing. In fact, that's what the FTC is looking into as we speak. So I would think it might come back to haunt us as pharmacists. But I don't know. We'll have to look at each individual case as we continue.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for that. I'm not too familiar other than just the ruling and how that might, impact the industry. But yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
and so kind of going back to the GLP-1s, what about like compliance and marketing? Should there be, I mean, I know we should talk about, it as being a disease state and, you had, diabetes can contribute to, weight gain and blah, blah, blah. But, as far as like having a website, should there be certain disclaimers that they should add for GLP-1s, patient education, anything to kind of, yeah, I see things on the websites, because that's kind of what I deal with a lot. So
Yeah.
I do see some concerns. I try to educate them. I think, going the disease state is a much safer way, but then I'm seeing, banners for GLP-1 or weight loss, semaglutide, basically, it's
Yeah.
what we're thought of so for weight loss. So I guess just like what disclaimer should be on the websites, what can they do for, patient education to be compliant in that arena?
Yeah. So, a few different things. So, just because other people are doing it doesn't make it legal. In fact, I'd argue, I've been looking for another client into this issue a little bit. I would say about 85% of what I'm seeing is completely illegal. Um, I would say that the other 15% is iffy at best. Because I think you're itching for a fight in many cases. Some of the largest compounding pharmacies out there are they're I understand why they're doing it, because you get market share, because you get to do a lot of stuff because of it. I think that you're itching for a fight you're likely to lose. Congress is not happy. FDA is not happy. State boards of pharmacy are not happy by the aggressive positioning and claims being made by a product that was never approved by the FDA. So when you go out there and you say, "Oh, I'm going to educate my patient," on what basis are you going to educate the patient? Because if you talk about semaglutide for weight loss, at that point you're asserting that your product has been approved for weight loss. And the moment you say my product is approved for weight loss, the question is it's either adulterated or misbranded, likely misbranded. So you're asking for trouble in that scenario. So you need to be very careful about how you position that. Does that make sense? Is that responsive?
Yes, yes, yes. So just to be safe, it really should just
Yeah.
focus on the disease states, and obviously weight loss, or I'm sorry, weight loss can be one of those
Yeah.
portions of that. So
The problem you have, Josh, and you're pointing to this very appropriately, how do you compete against someone who is taking that next step and saying semaglutide works for weight loss? In that scenario, you feel like you're at a handicap because your competitor is aggressively positioning themselves. And it's a valid concern, and you've got to decide, do you want to be like your competitor with a target on your back? Because we just saw, I think Lilly sued a bunch of telepharmacies and a bunch of compounding pharmacies on a variety of claims, everything from there are a couple of state law claims, unfair competition, for example. There are Lanham Act claims, which are like antitrust type of claims. And then there are several other sort of claims that they haven't gotten into, so I'm not going to raise. But I think you've got to be concerned about some of the positions that these companies have taken. Now, you might say, I'll take the risk. It's like whack-a-mole. As long as you don't hit me, there are 50 others like me, so I have a fighting chance, and I'll make money while the sun is shining. I'll make hay while the sun is shining. But I don't know if that translates every single time, and I think you may be asking for trouble. But is that responsive?
yes, that is. I see a lot of, when I'm driving, a lot of clinics, more so than pharmacies, have the big banners, semaglutide for weight loss,
Yeah.
$199 a month or something like that. But
Mm-hmm.
it's just the government. A lot of times things don't happen right away, so they think they're safe. They're
Yeah.
doing this, and 2-3 years later, their whole life is turned upside down.
Yes.
I understand, the challenges independent pharmacies face. This is, a profitable line of business for them. they want to
Correct.
capture it. I thought at least they got a good 3-year run before the manufacturers and the lawsuits step in. Well, that happened like literally like 6 months into the into the craze. So, you know, um, Morgan and Morgan, one of the biggest law firms, has jumped on the bandwagon with the lawsuit. So
Mhm.
just just a little nervous, with the pharmacies that kind of just want them to understand, this could be potential huge liability for them down the road.
Correct. 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 And these liabilities don't disappear because you just stop marketing that way. These liabilities continue for a certain period of time. You may be looking at years before you may be safe. So be careful. But yeah, your point's well made, and you as someone who markets for these pharmacies are dealing with this on a day-to-day basis. So how much do you get pushed to push that envelope?
Yeah, I mean, as far as marketing wise, I would just say recently in the last 3 months, that's been the biggest request is, hey, hey Josh, can you guys or your team, start promoting, the GLP-1s, and it's specifically for weight loss. We have a couple, pharmacy owners that, they're aware of the troubles out there. So they specifically say, don't mention anything about weight loss, just promote the medication and what the medication, was designed to do. So,
Well, what does that
that
mean? What do you mean? Promote the medication? What it was designed to do? What does that mean?
so for, if you're looking at, Ozempic, for example, or the,
Sure, sure.
compounded, it's for, you know, um, diabetes. So that should be the focus on it. What the medication, was, intended,
But that's the
intended.
difference. Here's the problem. Ozempic was approved for diabetes. Absolutely. Your product is not Ozempic. Your product is a compound that was made that has the same active ingredient as Ozempic. So for you to say my product is using the same active ingredient as Ozempic and Ozempic is approved for weight loss or approved for diabetes, whatever it was. You're basically saying that my product will work for diabetes, something that was never approved. And I think you have to be very careful. People think that they are being smart, but the FDA looks at the overall impression. And so does Lilly.
So what would be the best way, I guess, to maybe promote, advertise, the generic, the compounded forms of, these drugs like, Ozempic, Mounjaro.
Manjaro. Yeah, the issue you have is you can advertise that you make the product. You can advertise that um, it is it is on shortage, for example. Um, I would not make any disease state claims that go along with the product. They're called product claim ads. And the reason you don't want to do that is because you're saying, so the moment you make product claim ads, the FDA really says we have jurisdiction at this point. If you make
Uh,
um, just a disease state claim, so do you have weight loss problems? Reach out to us. Let's say that's what the ad was. You know what? No one has a problem with that because you're just talking about the disease state. We compound semaglutide, probably okay. We compound semaglutide for weight loss, you probably have a problem. It's the connection that's the problem. Um, Now people think that they're being fancy by saying, um, we compound semaglutide used for weight loss. We compound semaglutide. Well, we didn't talk about my semaglutide, so it's okay. No, you did. The agency and no court is dumb enough to think that that is not the same thing. And this whole we technically are okay, you're not. And be careful about what you're saying. Treating other individuals as idiots is probably not the smartest thing in the world. So judges are smart people, and juries are smart people, and you're basically using. And you'll see this happen where, and this is when Lilly really gets upset. They if you start saying Ozempic for weight loss, weak compound Ozempic, now you're making a specific claim about the product itself. Now you can probably get better clicks for it. You can probably get more patients for it. You can probably say we make Ozempic cheaper and probably get in trouble for it. But none of that makes it okay. Is that responsive?
Yes, that is, Darshan. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I was going to. Let's see. I want to. I just lost my.
And I should point out, Josh, just so you know, because this is important. People have been thinking that, oh, the only person who can get in trouble is the compounding facility. I'm telling this for the marketers out there. The Department of Justice has been going after marketers, specifically going after marketers. So you're seeing settlements with marketers. Marketers are going to jail over this kind of stuff, over non-compliant marketing. So be very careful. It is not obviously the infringer, if you will still get in trouble, but that does not mean you, just because you are acting on their behalf, are out of trouble. So just be careful.
Yeah, that's a good point. Obviously we get asked to do certain things, so that's something that we talked to our team last week, of course, after having a conversation with you too. Even if the client wants that, it's best to educate them, and if they still continue to push the button, then we have to decline that and possibly terminate the relationship with the client.
Something you got to decide. Yeah.
As far as like those Ozempic, with semaglutide and stuff like that, there's so much marketing out there, advertising out there. Clients know what it is, so as long as you have it on your website, it doesn't have to be. Hey, we compound semaglutide, and you don't really even have to add too much more. But if you want to, add stuff about the disease state, I think that would be even helpful. But there's
now you've got to be careful. You can say we compound semaglutide. The moment you start putting a link to the disease state on the same thing, you're now advertising both together. So this is what throws a lot of people off. So just because you didn't say it on your website, if you put a link on there, you're connecting those two things at that point.
I see, and I think too. It's really dipping into the manufacturer's product. And,
correct.
And just for those that are listening, anything that you have on our website, taking it down, like you think you're safe, anything that you put on your website, it's a permanent record. You can use sites like the Wayback Machine, and I can literally go back to a certain date and time and see what the content on your website was. So that's something to obviously keep in mind.
Absolutely.
And is there anything else that you can kind of think of that would be important for our audience to know about?
Yeah, I would think a little bit about the relationships you're building with physicians. I'd think about what those contracts are going to say. I would think a little bit about what is your internal risk tolerance. I would look at not just what you're saying on your website, but what are your marketers saying? What is your contract with your marketers saying? I would think a little bit about what is your social media saying? What kind of policies do you have for compliance? Who is evaluating these claims? I can assure you, how should I say this nicely? When you think you're being slick, you're really not. I'm seeing this not only in the context of pharmacy, right? Pharmacy right now is going through this upheaval now that at least one of the products may come off of shortage. But I think the big concern lands up being what happens if you are a like you're seeing this, for example, for those people who are doing real estate, the NAR lawsuit. I don't know if you guys have been following that, but there was a Justice Department settlement which went after NAR, the National Association of Realtors, and basically said that you can't advertise your commission split. And I'm not trying to get into that lawsuit, but the big thing was you're seeing these realtors think that they're being slick now by putting it somewhere else, or by saying that, oh, we'll wink, wink, nod this, or we'll have a symbol that means blah. Yeah, you know what? Everyone knows. And the idea that you're going to fool everyone because you're super smart, technically right, is not good enough in most cases. People are going to look at the overall impression, and don't try to be slick. Don't try to be smart. Get the right advice. Reach out to me if you think I can help. And I'd be happy to tell you a little bit more. Have someone evaluate your sites and then tell you, because then at least you're operating under legal guidance. Because the last thing you want is saying, I thought I made a decision. I thought I was okay. It's you want someone to review, because you're talking about millions of dollars you're spending in advertising and marketing while bringing that same attention to yourself, while bringing potential actions from the Justice Department, from the FDA, from state boards, from the actual commercial manufacturer. Be careful. And here's the funny thing. We talked a lot about 503Bs. 503As are now getting to the business of saying, oh, we're going to add thiamine to it. We're going to add something else to it. Be very careful about whether that qualifies as quote unquote essentially a copy. So you're not allowed to make something that is essentially a copy. The question is, when is something essentially a copy? If you and that's a fact by fact, it's a case by case analysis. It's fact specific. But if you are, for example, sharing pre-printed notepads with your specific combination of semaglutide with, say, thiamine in there, and then saying, you know what, doctors, we can make this because it's individual and it is needed for your specific patients, and we want a letter from you saying that's needed for your specific patients. Again, you may or may not be being slick, because is it really for an individual patient if you literally have a stack this thick that you pre-printed that applies to every single patient? And I think that may come back to haunt you as well. So be careful.
That's a good point. And just my prior work history, insurance claims, underwriting, SIU, special investigation units. A lot of times, if we have an issue we don't know about, a lot of times it's the competitors that are turning you in. So
yeah,
you're advertising your stuff on social media or on these Facebook groups. You may have someone on there that doesn't like you, or they feel like, hey, you're making all this money and I'm doing things the right way, I'm going to turn you in. So a lot of times that's how the governments or the companies will find out that you're doing something you shouldn't be doing.
I love it. And I think you're right. I think you have to be careful about whistleblowers. You have to be careful about your competitors. And whistleblowers, people forget that it's not always just your competitors. It might be someone like a employee who got upset with you.
Employee, yeah.
So
probably
be careful.
Probably more so the employee. They get upset and things go.
Yeah. Talk to someone like Josh. Josh is smart. He's been keeping track of this information. Hopefully, Josh, I don't know exactly what you've done in this scenario. So feel free to tell people. Hopefully they'll reach out to you and talk to you a little bit about these types of conversations.
Yeah, I mean, I contacted you a couple of days ago because I had a question. I don't want to, I just didn't. I can research and stuff, but I wanted to hear from somebody who's in the field. So that's why I reached out to you. You help clarify that, question that our client had, and, he was happy. So I think that's important. A lot of times, if I don't know something, I don't want to guess. I don't want to, of course, Google or the internet's a valuable source of information, but it doesn't bypass what an attorney has experienced, real case scenarios. So, your feedback was, highly valuable. Darshan, I know we've been on here for a little bit, but I had like two more items. See if I could maybe discuss. So back from my experience from 2008, it's kind of, the ADA has kind of like stepped or laid off going after independent pharmacies for their websites not being compliant. Now, this year I've heard and verified at least 4 pharmacies that have received fines for their sites not being ADA compliant. We know what we need to do on our end to do that, but I don't know if you've heard anything about them going after, more pharmacies in, particular, just because they tend to go after more healthcare related businesses or larger businesses. You know, they should know better, but I don't know if you've heard anything on your neck of the woods about, those audits and fines. And they're not really fines or lawsuits, and the first one could be like 25,000, second one could be 50,000, and then go up from there.
So I have seen a lot of discussion around the lawsuits from private individuals. I haven't quite seen going after pharmacies from the agency itself, so that's a new development. I'd love to see the letters. I'd love to see what is appropriate and help respond if that's appropriate for you guys. Be very careful. What you want to do with a lot of these agencies is you want to actually, because you getting the letter is typically an opportunity to fix. Usually you've been notified. So find out if you've been notified before and try to fix things up front. The ADA is about access. It's about accessibility, making sure that people who may not have the same access, for example, if your website is very, very picture heavy, well, how are people who can't see going to access it? So they want to make sure that the web is accessible for everyone. In those scenarios, make sure that you actually have appropriate controls in place, and it's relatively easy to do that, but it's something you have to be aware of and that you are keeping track of. So again, someone like Josh is well positioned to guide you in that through that process. I've been asked to help with scenarios like that before. You often need to actually have it in your terms. You also need to be talking about it in, like, describe pictures, for example. It's as simple as that. You have ChatGPT, use ChatGPT, but don't depend on ChatGPT. For a second, for example, Josh, going back to the previous topic, you talked about how you did some research on the internet. I actually tried to ask this question to ChatGPT to see what answer it gave around advertising and compliance. The answer was wrong. The answer was not just incomplete, it was wrong. At least the version I asked. It said a lot of similar things like, "Oh, don't." I'm trying to remember how it positioned it. Essentially, it said that don't connect, but you can still make claims. And I was like, you are asking for trouble if you follow these rules, if you follow this advice. So I thought it was fascinating that depending on ChatGPT could become problematic. So be careful. In the same way, look to learn, but reach out to an expert to guide you through that process. But yeah, so that would be my advice.
Yeah, there was that one attorney who was on a Zoom call, and he used ChatGPT to write out the case, but it quoted fictitious case sites that didn't
Yes.
exist. But it
Yes.
looked really good. But yeah, it's a tool, but you cannot rely on it 100%. And if it's going to be something that can land you in legal hot water, I mean, you want to talk to an attorney. I mean, look at me. If I have a question, I reach out to you. I just, we don't want to risk things. So that's important to know. And, and then probably my last question is what, I'm seeing like on the buying group GPO side, it's just with the National Inflation Reduction Act.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the insulin at $35 and stuff, but the majority when you enter into a GPO or buying group contract, you have a primary wholesaler that most times they're going to require you to place 85% of all the drugs with them, and then outside that you can use secondary and tertiary wholesalers. But what I'm seeing happen is a lot of pharmacies are being out of compliance, so that's hurting their rebates, reimbursements, and stuff like that. Because if they're paying more with a primary, and they can get that almost about half or even lower than half from a secondary. And what I see is like the primaries are aware of that, but the there's no concessions to be made up for that as well, and they're holding their feet to the contract that they sign. So I wasn't sure if you heard anything maybe in the future coming down the line with maybe primary wholesalers, you know, I guess taking in consideration about the Inflation Reduction Act.
So the Inflation Reduction Act at this moment only applies to 10 drugs. It only applied to branded drugs that were tied to essentially what was deemed to be extremely expensive drugs. One of which was even a rare disease state drug. At least one of them was at least a rare disease state drug. They came out finally this week with the list of savings that they hope to achieve. Things like, for example, insulin was not on that list. There are separate laws that are targeting insulin pricing. Additionally, the discussions you're having around whether GPOs might be incentivized to be more considerate of pharmacy needs. There's nothing out there that's looking, at least that I know of, that's looking into this issue the way pharmacists would want to. I think pharmacists right now are in a really tough spot. And I think pharmacists are in a tough spot because they're being squeezed in so many different directions. And I think that's true for a lot of different businesses because you often are dealing with multiple pressure centers, if you will. The big one for pharmacies was PBMs. And we know that the FTC is looking into that issue right now. The other one was the actual drug cost, which theoretically with the IRA, the pharma companies are going to have to address the heightened costs. But I think that overall, taking that into consideration, are all of pharmacy's issues going to disappear in 1 year, in 2 years, in 5 years? Probably not. It's one of those things where people are almost going to be careful what you ask for, you just might get it. It's going to be the law of perverse incentives. As we fix these problems, new problems will appear. And we'll say that those are more problematic than, for example, the GPO. Something as simple as you need to place 85% of your orders with us, that's a pure contract claim. And a pharmacy may have to decide whether it's appropriate to have that type of agreement and maybe push back, if you will. But it's easier said than done, right? I mean, when they are buying so much product from you, selling you so much product, you have to be very, very careful. And it could come back to haunt you. So you've got to be. Unfortunately, I'm not aware of anything that is getting into that world.
Okay. Do you see or hear anything that can potentially be positive for independent pharmacies coming down the road, maybe in the next couple of years? It's just always doom and gloom. With the PBMs, when you think you got to figure out you got them, you're going to hurt them in the wallet. They already have plan A, B, C ready to go. So it doesn't seem like they ever lose. So I just, everything's about trying to move pharmacies into, the cash pay business, but that's not feasible for a lot of pharmacy owners. So I don't know if there's anything that's potentially, a rainbow in the sky for independent pharmacies.
I think, it's funny you say that. I see the world slightly differently. I think that independent pharmacy, we've got to stop thinking of independent pharmacies as a monolith, in my opinion. For example, you just pointed out, each pharmacy has their own unique needs, and each pharmacy has their own unique mix of things they want to do. I think the ones that are going to succeed are the ones that take chances, are the ones that go, here's a new model I want to consider. That they're the ones that go, if I stay stagnant and try to do exactly what my father and my grandfather, my mother and my grandmother did, it's probably going to be very difficult for you as you continue. On the other hand, if you go, I'm going to try new things out there because I think I'm seeing new opportunities, I think that I can think of several ideas that pharmacies are like, there's all sort of rainbows in the sky. I think the PBM thing is actually going to be hopefully very good for pharmacies because you're already seeing several states, not just the FTC, but several states going in and saying, we don't like what PBMs are doing, and we're going to put laws into place that regulate how PBMs work. Now, you might say that's not good enough because PBMs will have version 2, version 3, version 4. You can only fight one battle at a time. You can't fight every possible battle. But I think that's a good thing. I think, for example, digital health gives pharmacies so many opportunities. You talk about clinical trials. Pharmacies were not even in the periphery of clinical trials. We're now in the center of it. And this was not independent pharmacies. This was, for example, Walgreens and CVS, who were in clinical trials. CVS has stepped out. Walgreens is still in there. But I think there's absolutely a market out there for independent pharmacies to go, let me try to curate the disease state. Sorry, the experience you have around digital health. Let me explain what these different pieces mean to you as a patient. It's becoming very patient-centric. You have physicians who are taking on a very innovative approach. You have physicians who are tying hands and becoming these telepharmacy sort of conglomerates, if you will. And you're seeing, for example, the Hims and the Rose of the world do so well as pharmacies. Now, some might argue that they're stepping over certain lines, but they're growing exponentially. If you, as an independent pharmacy owner, are saying, I want to continue to be who I was 10 years ago, the entire world has changed. Why do you think you can survive without changing? And I think that's where you need someone like Josh to come in and say, let us help you reposition yourself. We want the world to see you the way you are, which is changing, innovative, and sort of looking out for patients. And I think that is going to be the essential component of being an innovative pharmacy and addressing this exact need you were talking about, which is it all doom and gloom? No, I think there's just incredible opportunities out there. I have some ideas that I literally haven't even pursued because I go, it'd be great, but I have like 5 other ideas I want to pursue first. But think about clinical research. Think about robotics. Think about, I know people, this apply telepharmacy. I don't see too many pharmacies doing that, for example, centralizing resources. But suddenly you're able to expand. I had a client who was in that world, and he had so many opportunities, and I commend him for going after that because it didn't work out for him for other reasons. But I very much think that what he did was take a chance. And pharmacies have to look out for those opportunities. So I would say I don't think it's doom and gloom. I welcome them reaching out to someone like you to guide them through new opportunities that are coming up.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, but there's pharmacies opening up new locations or startups that are doing, really, really well. I kind of like look at the 80-20 rule. There's 20% of these pharmacies that are absolutely killing it, and what I see is like they're in niches. We're a niche agency. We're doing independent. I like to say community pharmacy owners, but that's all we do. We're not
Exactly.
We're not a jack of all trades. We're not doing dental. We're not doing plumbing, marketing. That's all you want
Correct.
to know. So if I was a pharmacy owner and kind of maybe look maybe there's a lot of high schools around, a lot of a younger demographic, you can get into just, have a, not all your business, but you could specifically maybe focus on acne, this is what we're good at. And, you have that information on your website. I just, seniors and, you kind of just want to be the pharmacy that's all you're known for. It's just get my medication filled. You're on that. You're going to be transactional only, and that's all they're going to see you for. And just people that shop on price, leave on price.
Yeah.
There are just so many areas where you can be successful with the knowledge that you have.
Yes.
There's ones that focus just on government institutions. Of course, you got to be a little larger, but like prisons and jails. You can go into like the boys' homes, and so there's a lot of stuff to I guess like I don't know, think out the box. What everybody else is doing in your area. Know your know your competition, what they're doing, and see how you can kind of differentiate yourself from that.
I,
It's
I have a friend
what I
who
see.
who had a. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead, Josh.
No, I was gonna say what I see a lot about is asking to promote and marketing is, of course, weight loss, hormone therapy treatments, which is great, and like I said, just weight loss, hormone therapy. Yeah, it's just a lot of the same stuff that everybody else is doing. There's functional medicine, wellness. Some of the pharmacies that I see that are different, they're doing like cognitive testing for a brain. Your brain, you can kind of go in there and get your test. So I like technology. I think technology, the landscape, 10 years from now, I think the way pharmacies do business will almost probably be unrecognizable. You mentioned like robotics and stuff like that. I really think that's going to be it's going to impact. And so you should start thinking about that now, and take advantage of it. I mean, AI is not going to put you out of business. Robotics is not. You should use that as a tool to help grow your business and think out the box. Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities. I see pharmacies that do well. I try to share that on my Facebook groups, like what I see. So there's a market. It really depends on your location. If you're a rural pharmacy, you're the only pharmacy in like 30 miles. What are you doing different if you're in a low income area and require a lot on Medicaid? Is that hurting your business? Well, how can you counteract that? There's like the diaper program where, they're picking up, the government's picking up, the CMS is picking up the tab on diapers. I think some of the pharmacies that are doing that, they're having a hard time getting those actual diapers, but that's bringing in a lot of business. This is another way to advertise that. Some things that we did in Flint, Michigan for a pharmacy owner out there is, of course, the HRT. But we put I put a marketing campaign because the Flint, Michigan, the water crisis, a lot of lead in the water. Of course, they say it's clean. When the governor taking a sip of, or I think it was Obama who took the sip of the Flint water. But when you're advertising, is just saying HRT, but leading into like a campaign where you're focusing on educating them. So asking the questions, if you're having hair loss or this and that, vision issues, weight loss, weight gain, it could be impacted by your water. But more specifically, the campaigns I was running, I was going after pet owners because it was a compounding pharmacy. So kind of like leading into is you're kind of like making a funny ad. See if your dog has been impacted by the water crisis in Flint. Take this quiz. So take that quiz. It's basically a lead for you. And we know people that care about their animals. They're willing to use a pharmacy to get pet medications. They're a good customer. They're going to be a good customer for you. So that's kind of why I recommended targeting, kind of using the water crisis to kind of go after pets. People click, right? They see cat, dog, birds, they're going to click on that stuff. So, and it makes you seem more personal as a pharmacy owner because, you care about animals that, you're going to attract a certain type of individual. I just, and I'll kind of close with this, maybe some marketing tips that, I've recommended and seen that's worked is, you maybe don't want to associate with religion, but if you're looking to use like radio, there's Christian radio networks, not just having just an ad, but being able to maybe, like if we're having a podcast, kind of like an interview and getting that message out, creating Facebook groups for your community and giving free advice. That's pretty much how I started my marketing agency. I didn't I didn't say, hey, woke up one day, I want to start an agency. I've had owners saying, hey, you should, but pharmacy marketing group on Facebook. I just share my knowledge, and that's helped me. I think pharmacists have a wealth of knowledge. They set up a Facebook page. You're going to get community people inviting others, you share that, it's seasonal information, it's summertime, what are you going to talk about? Skin cancer, how you can protect that, when, cold and flu season, you want to be an expert in your field, and you want your community to know that you're an expert, besides Facebook groups, which I think are probably the most valuable, but there's Nextdoor, which is an application. They also have groups as well where you're interacting with your neighbors. You can also, you can have a digital newsletter, a digital magazine where you invite your prescribers. Maybe you have, your PCP that you like. You have a dental practice, the dentist, the dental owner is there. It's like the law of reciprocity. You're helping in their business. You're not really asking them for anything in return. It's just going to come to you naturally because it's helping your audience, right? Because they're a subject matter expert in what they do, and they're sharing that information to benefit the community as a whole. So I think those kind of things work out well. One unique way is especially insurance. Now I'm not in that. I would never share this secret, but I have a few pharmacy owners that have tried it and still use it. Is sponsor a car wash because Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Just really depends, but at least here in California, that could be anywhere from 600 to 700 cars a day. And people that take care of the cars, they have money to spend. They take care of their health. And if the car wash owner is like a lot of times is the shirts, those go for their employees, those go bad. So if you worked out with something like, hey, I'll sponsor the T-shirt, we'll put of course your name, but I like to put our pharmacy name on there. What I would like to do is, put some banners, out there, maybe you got to work that out with the owner and have banners, maybe have hot dogs and hamburgers like one weekend. You have air fresheners, right? Now, you got to be careful, like some car washes like charge and make money on, some don't even offer it. But you have a car wash that maybe looks like a pill with your pharmacy's information. The one that I like is like coupons. So you work with the owner and say maybe you want to sponsor like 100 car washes. So you got to get the certificates made with serial numbers on there so no one's copying that. But what happens when they get a car wash, their next return visit, it's a coupon off their next car wash. So maybe it's $10 off, maybe it's $5 off. But typically if you do like a $10 off car wash, and at the end of the month, the owner is going to give you all those certificates, and then they're going to go ahead and pay the owner out for that. But it's a way for the car wash owner to get return business, but it's also a way for you to get your name out. It's a lot cheaper than running paid ads on, Google, Facebook, Bing, and TikTok and YouTube. So I just try to get creative. There's juice bar. There's so many businesses that you can use, to do that, and just really, I always just reach out to people. Other businesses have the same goal you do. Your business owners, you want to grow and network and thrive with each other. So I will that's the last tidbit I can share, or not last tidbit I will, but I will end that. Unless you have anything else, Darshan, that you think would be important that maybe we didn't cover today.
I would address two more things. One is you talk about cognitive therapy, and that's a really interesting angle. What you want to be careful of is you need to look at your state board of pharmacy's definition of practice of pharmacy. Make sure that whatever you're doing falls within that definition, because what you don't want to do is exceed that, because your insurance will not cover you if something goes wrong. So just make sure you're thinking about that as you continue. I love what you said, Josh. I love what you said. You talk like 1,000 different options. And I love that it came from you, because you started off with, it's so doom and gloom. And then you mentioned 1,000 different things that people could be doing that they won't, because they think they have to be exactly what they were doing before. So I love how you pointed out like 100 niches that they could get into. So to reach out to Josh for that kind of stuff. I would be careful, however, with something like coupons, because that can come back to bite you for multiple reasons. One is, if you are dealing with payers, you have to worry about, especially government payers, you have to worry about what's called beneficiary inducement, and you have to worry about things like kickback. So you just be careful to see if it applies. I'm going to be clear, I'm not a reimbursement expert. There are people who are very good at reimbursement. I am not that person. But I do advise on things like I know when to issue spot. The other thing I'd be careful of is the there are FTC rules that apply to things like coupons, so be aware of them. For example, doing lotteries around, oh, you win a copay free, for example. So pick up your medication without a copay. Well, there are rules around copays, for example, and there are rules around lotteries. So be sure that you're following both. But overall, I think you pointed out so beautifully, Josh, because I came up with like 2 and you came up with like 15. I thought that was awesome where you pointed out the money is not just in being, I'm going to fill a medication for every pharmacy out there. You're doing the exact same thing. Flint's going to have a very different marketing thing than if you went to, for example, Louisiana or you went to Texas. What if you actually, and I don't know this, if you did like a barbecue in Texas and people are coming over as a community event, and it's around your pharmacy. Like, I think that's awesome. I hadn't even thought of that. It's such a brilliant idea. But it came from you doing this. Bring awareness. Go in. If you don't want to associate with churches and stuff, that's totally fair. But go and talk to your local church if you want to, and help parishioners. Like they would love to have someone talk to them about their medication. And I think that's awesome and that's bringing awareness to what you do. And I think that people in your parish would appreciate the effort and the education you provide. I love how you brought that angle to it. So, we could just keep doing this. We've been at this for an hour, but we could keep going, but because that's how fun this topic is. And Josh, we should probably do this more often because this was a lot of fun. Quick question, Josh. How can people reach you with questions?
Oh, they can reach out to me at josh@dispensemarketing.com or visit our website at dispensemarketing.com. Darshan, just before we close, with the coupon things, there's a lot of pharmacies that want to attract business. Like Walmart has their discount cards. So what they're doing is they create like and from my understanding, it has to be like a paid prescription card. It can't be free. But what they do is like the generic discounts, like, basically like $4 generics. Some are doing like $2 generics. They want to really do it lower. And that's just really, for them, I think it's the lead magnet to attract that business. Can you get into any hot water by doing that with the discount card? Or it's like a membership card. It's like a monthly membership where they pay into it and then it gives them access to low generics.
I think the difference is whether you're tying it to a drug that'll be reimbursed by Medicare, Medicaid, or private payers. Okay. When notice that you're talking about tying it to a low-cost cash product. And I think that may potentially be okay. Again, like I said, I'm not a reimbursement expert, but there are people who will look into this topic for you or know this topic like the back of their hand. But the idea is that government payers are careful. Here's what they're trying to avoid. They're trying to avoid unnecessary costs for the government, and they're trying to avoid fraud. So, for example, if you go out there and you say, I'll give you $2 off your next prescription, which is tied to your copay, and your copay is $10, neither the government, for example, you won't see big pharma tie their copays to anything. They specifically, in many of their coupons, will specifically say does not apply to government reimbursed products. Now you're tying it, for example, to a membership. You're tying it maybe to your the cash products. That might be okay. You'd have to double check that. But a simple thing might be, to your point, Josh, generally speaking, you're not just a pharmacy. Tie it to your front end. You know what? $2 off your candy, and then you're probably home free. Because you're trying to drive traffic into the store. Once they're in the store, you're probably in a much better place.
Right.
So, something to think about.
There's a lot of, we got to have another podcast, but there's co-op market. There's co-op, marketing opportunities, even for manufacturers, wholesalers, or even vendors. Maybe BioLite, you sell a ton of BioLite, and you say, hey, I want to do this marketing campaign. Would you be willing to co-op? And they may look at it and say, well, why not? We're branding our name. It's going to cost us 50% less. You're picking up 50%. We're picking up 50%. It's a good way. And I know a lot of the wholesalers do like Facebook co-ops, like McKesson. They'll do like a 50-50. Issue is what they have. Pretty much you have to use their language, and it not always works the best when you're marketing. But it's out there. So I'll end with that. But thank you very much, Darshan. And also, I'm all over the country. So what states do you practice in, or what states can you take clients on if they want to work with you?
So my practice tends to be a federal practice, so it lands up helping people all over the country. I've helped people literally all over the country, but I'm not, for example, I just want to be clear, I'm only barred in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. But I've had people from all over the country reach out to me, and I guide them, being very clear about where I'm barred and where I'm not barred. But thank you for asking that. And you can reach me, just to be clear, at darshan@kulkarnilawfirm.com, or hopefully this will happen soon enough. But if you just go to either kulkarnilawfirm.com or fdalawguy.com, it'll probably bring you up as well. So I'm working on getting that website developed as well. But everyone, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for listening. Talk to Josh. Feel free to reach out to me, and we're going to put some stuff out there and hopefully have more of these.
Thank you, Darshan. I really appreciate you taking the time with me today.